destitute, low, needy, penniless, underprivileged. These are some words to describe the poor, especially during the pandemic.
According to the Catechism of the Catholic Church 1733, the more one does what is good, the freer one becomes. There is no true freedom except in the service of what is good and just. The choice to obey and do evil is an abuse of freedom, and one becomes a slave to sin. In the Philippines, where more than a quarter of the country's population of 92.3 million lives below the poverty line, economic and social inequality is a significant problem. As economic inequality has become more pronounced in the past decade, this has resulted in geographical disparity in the Philippines. In Mindanao, the southernmost and second largest of the Philippines islands, 6 of the 10 regions are among the top 10 nationally in terms of poverty rates, with between 25 and 40% of families living in abject poverty.
God didn't give everyone the same intelligence or social status when He created them. Most people living in poverty experience hunger, illness, financial uncertainty, and lack of education. And some experience social injustices because they say poor people do not have the money to protect themselves and get justice. Like the recent issue, a security guard sustained multiple injuries after being violently run over by a SUV. Unfortunately, because of the driver's social status, he was not jailed. Instead, the LTO suspended his driver's license. Not only that, but poverty has been linked to violence in several ways. Not to mention, the children who struggle to live in poverty encounter many difficulties, including being subjected to harsh kinds of policing and discipline. In households with minimal opportunities for skill development and upward mobility, violence and intergenerational poverty are intimately associated. Due to the fact that most of the children who are abused or mistreated by the police are street children or adolescents from broken homes, there are clear connections between poverty, disregard for children's social and economical rights, and violence such as child abuse and torture.
The COVID-19 pandemic affected many lives, especially the poor community. This global crisis has taken a heavy toll on rural livelihoods, which has led to the loss of income and job opportunities. Moreover, the disaster-prone communities experienced more difficulties coping with COVID-19 restrictions and its severe economic impact, including the poor living on the streets. Psalm chapter 9 verse 18 says, "For the needy shall not always be forgotten, and the hope of the poor shall not perish forever." Everyone should not obliterate poor people, instead treat them with respect because God made His people equal.
These social injustices highlight the wide gap between how the rich are often accommodated in certain situations due to their money, power, and connections, whereas the poor and underprivileged are placed at a disadvantage. In recent times, the disparity between the two social classes is continuously increasing, especially with the ongoing pandemic. The livelihood of those underprivileged is more heavily impacted than those wealthier in the country. Even though money isn't everything, it is something important as it is a medium of exchange. It allows us to have the capability to acquire our needs like food, healthcare, housing, and education, which are essential to the welfare of people. As insufficient access to material, financial, and social resources continues, poverty arises, and thus inequality in our society prevails.
During these past 3 years, the pandemic has affected the economy as working class struggle with the loss of job and resources for survival. While those wealthy and stable continue with their lifestyle in this new normal, approximately 3 million out of 16 million Filipinos who are floating have financial aid from the government. In addition, some businesses did not offer severance pay when they shut down their business. As a result, workers' rally and labor organizations regularly sought the Department of Labor and Employment, but were always denied. The police also forbade protests and jailed anyone who tried to use the epidemic as a justification. According to Cordero, these low-income families become more vulnerable as they cannot provide for their needs. With the decrease of 9.5% of gross domestic product along with the increase of price of goods, it becomes a survival of the fittest in the country in terms of wealth.
Children's education was also put on halt, which caused learning poverty to surge from 35% to 45%. In the Philippines, 90.9% live in a state of educational poverty and 90.4% are deprived of education as of 2019. 7 out of 10 kids from low and middle class households in a country are unable to learn how to read and comprehend simple text because of the ongoing school closures and the failure of online learning during the pandemic.
Current economic models have let the world down. They have consolidated power in the hands of a select few at the cost of the world's poorest and most disadvantaged people. They are flawed and sexist. They have made the climatic disaster worse, killing millions of lives and means of subsistence. They have continued to support various interconnected forms of inequality, which are the main contributors to injustice and poverty.
According to Job chapter 5 verse 15 to 16, He saves the needy from the swords in their mouth, He saves them from the clutches of the powerful, so the poor have hope and injustice shuts his mouth. When those marginalized are violated and denied of rights, social injustice has occurred. These shortcomings eventually make it difficult for the poor to access justice compared to those living in a stable lifestyle. Therefore, we must address inequality and raise awareness of how improving our social justice can reduce poverty in our country. When their rights are violated, those who are poor are more vulnerable to discrimination, crimes, abuse, and violence. Poverty is also felt by their families who also deals with the same situation as them. Proper access to justice is an effective solution in regards to poverty and social injustice.
Together,
we must uphold basic human rights
by addressing the deficiency in our system.
The government
should take action in expanding access to
housing,
food,
education,
healthcare,
and other necessities,
along with demanding affordable housing
and establishing laws that will reduce poverty.
We, Catholics,
have the gift and responsibility
of carrying the image and likeness of God.
Therefore, we are called to
act justly and to love mercy, and to walk humbly with your God.
Micah chapter 6 verse 4.
As our society continues to change, the lady in our community can make a difference by starting to do small acts like educating ourselves and utilizing social media to get the attention of a large audience, to raise awareness of social injustices and promote the rights of our fellow Filipinos. Donating, joining, and volunteering in organizations also have a great impact to fight social inequality.
By making use of our privilege, we can utilize our power to improve our economy by amplifying the voices of the underprivileged and reshaping our society into a more equal and just environment where everyone is able to sustain their needs and exercise their human rights, where we can slowly alleviate the poor from poverty and empower and give them an opportunity to succeed.
In the Bible, God speaks often of the poor and needy. He commands us to give generously to the less fortunate and to speak up on their behalf. The Bible tells us that generosity yields an amazing crop. When we refresh others through giving, we are refreshed ourselves. As Luke chapter 6 verse 38 says, "Give and it will be given to you. A good measure, pressed down, shaken together, and running over, will be poured into your lap. For with the measure used, it will be measured to you." When we study what God says about giving to the poor, we can see His heart and understand the important responsibility God has given to us.
Through our continuous faith in Christ,
we foster and exhibit His kindness,
empathy,
respect,
and compassion for the underprivileged.
We, as a community, show unity,
and that we uphold and ultimately restore human dignity,
especially during these difficult times.